Happy New Year and welcome to Reimbursement Readiness, Business Tips for Wound Practice, presented by Kathleen and friends. I don't know about you, but I am really glad that 2025 is behind us. As a reimbursement strategy and education consultant for more than 50 years, I am accustomed to ever-changing coding, coverage, and payment. However, the fluctuating reimbursement information and regulations pertaining to cellular and/or tissue-based products for skin wounds, better known as CTPs, was the worst that I experienced in my entire reimbursement career. I suspect that most of you, if not all of you, are also feeling like it has been a roller coaster of CTP information and regulations. And you're probably also glad that 2025 is now behind us. However, I am still receiving a plethora of calls and emails from hospital-owned outpatient wound ulcer management provider-based departments, better known as PBDs. These departments have not aligned their purchasing for their CTPs, their documentation, their charging, their coding, and their billing systems with the 2026 Medicare Outpatient Prospective Payment System Final Rule, better known as OPPS. Now, in episode number 13, I discussed the importance of the Medicare OPPS final rule and how it changed the payment for CTPs in 2026. But based on the calls and the emails that I am now receiving, many PBDs did not realize that the CTP Medicare payment changes would not happen by magic. And they did not refine their CTP purchasing patterns and all the components of their revenue cycle. Therefore, this podcast will discuss the system refinements that PBDs must make in order to receive the appropriate payment for CTPs in 2026. As I review each refinement, ask yourself if you completed that task. If you did complete all the payment tasks that I discuss, congratulations, you are ready. If you only completed some or none of the payment tasks, please do so immediately if physicians and QHPs are applying CTPs in your departments. Now, to review this, I actually prepared a little table for you. And those of you who are viewing this on your computers would be able to see the table, or you can pull the slide deck up later. But I just really wanted to let you have a real clear understanding of how the payment changes affected two things. One, the payment for the application of the products, and two, the payment for the products themselves. And in the table that I prepared for you, you can see the difference between the 2025 national average allowable payment rates for the application codes. And then you can see how they reduced in 2026. And you might be wondering, well, why did they reduce? Well, they reduced because Medicare did us a great favor and they unpackaged the payment for the product from the payment for the procedure. Therefore, the procedure payment went down. Also on that table, you will probably notice in the large sized application codes, we have had a problem for ever since packaging went into place. And that is that the payment rate, the allowable rate for a 100 square centimeter ulcer on the leg was what it should be, but the payment for the same size ulcer on the foot was not that high. In fact, it was the same rate as for an ulcer that was on a foot that was less than 25 square centimeters. So that has always been a problem, and that's why the PBDs could not afford to put CTPs on diabetic foot ulcers. And by looking at the chart, you will see that this year, CMS finally got it, and they made the payment for the application of the diabetic foot ulcer code the same as for the leg code of the same size, 100 square centimeters. So that's very important. Now, with that unpackaging, you have some things you must do in order to make that be implemented in your facility. First, you need to reduce your charges for the application codes 15271 to 15278 because you have to remove the portion of your charge that was for the product. You also need to review your charge for 15277. That's the code to apply a CTP to an ulcer on the foot, 100 square centimeters or greater. That your charge in your system for 15277 may be the same charge as you charge for 15275, which is for an ulcer on the foot of only 25 square centimeters. And just because Medicare changed the payment rates, if you don't change your charge for 15277, you will not get the increased allowable rate for 15277. So that's really important for you to do. You also need to remove the codes C5271 through C5278 and their charges from all your systems because we no longer need those codes. We don't use those codes, and we want to be sure nobody makes a mistake and selects them or drops them onto a claim. The reason we don't need C5271 to C5278 is Medicare is no longer grouping your CTPs by high cost and low cost products. So now you are going to use the codes 15271 through 15278 for the application of all CTPs except those that are not sheets. And CMS has clearly told the provider-based departments that they are still not paying for CTPs that are not sheets. Now, once you have addressed your charges for your application codes and removed the C5271 to C5278, you need to be sure go into your electronic health record, go into your charge description master, go into your coding software and your billing software and be sure all of those changes have been made and that they are working perfectly. You might even do a trial bill just to see if they will work correctly. Now, we also know that CMS is going to pay us separately for the CTP product, and that all the products, irregardless of the brand, are going to be paid $127.14 per square centimeter. That will be with the exception if there were any CTPs that were FDA approved via the BLA route, they would not be paid at 127.14. Currently, we don't have any. And also, as I said, they are not paying for the non-sheet products. So now that you know that there is going to be this one flat rate, it's very important for you to review your contracted prices for your CTPs that are sheets. And you need to verify that your costs are equal to or less than $127.14 per square centimeter. Otherwise, you will lose money. All right, so in that case, you may choose to delete some of those products from your formulary. And if you do, you need to remove them off of all of your system. All right. Also, if you have been charging out for the non-sheet products, remember that you cannot charge for them this year. All right. And so you will be sure they are never going onto a claim as the code for a non-sheet product, and that they're not being reported with 15271 to 15278. Now, if you've deleted products, you might also be adding products in order to make your formulary have enough products to take care of the different problems that you have with your chronic ulcers. And if you add the CTPs to your formulary, then be sure that they would be covered by the payers and that they would cost less than $127.14 per square centimeter. If you do that, whatever you delete and whatever you add, you need to update your electronic health record, your charge description master, your coding software, and your billing software. And the last thing I want to remind you about is late in the year, CMS reminded us that they will no longer be paying for wastage of CTPs. So it's very important that you document and you report the number of square centimeters you apply to the ulcers and its margins. However, just because you do that, you need to verify that your electronic health record is going to accept that documentation for how much you buy, how much you apply, and how much you waste. And you need to be sure that your charge description master is set up to charge per square centimeter, because currently you might have your charge description master set up to bill out per sheet. You then also need to be sure that your coding and your billing software also are able to bill out per square centimeter, because you're only able to bill for the square centimeters that you applied. So in summary, reminding you that 2026 OPPS final rule brought us great news to the PBDs, because we now are able to have separate payment for the application of the product as well as the product. We did get an increased payment for the application of the CTP to the large diabetic foot ulcers. That's also great news. And we have a single payment rate for all covered sheet CTPs. Now, we also have to remember that we're only going to get paid for the number of square centimeters that we applied. But keep in mind that this great payment news will not happen by magic. PBDs must refine their formularies, must refine their EHRs, must refine their CDMs, their coding software, and their billing software. And I hope this helps you, and I hope that you will be very diligent about making these refinements to your system. Now, stay tuned, because in episode 18, Wound Care Today USA is going to address the 2026 CTP reimbursement questions that we are receiving from physicians and other qualified healthcare professionals who practice in all places of service. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me today. And again, I always encourage you to send me any questions or topics that you would like to see addressed in reimbursement readiness to my email address, KathleenDSchaum@gmail.com. Once again, Happy New Year, and thank you for listening.